Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Getting to the End Zone, How to Create an Effective On-Demand DR Plan. In this session, you'll learn how to build a disaster recovery plan that captures all the steps from detection of outage to recovery and create one that will protect critical applications no matter what the cause. My name is Marguerite McGrail, and I'm the marketing specialist here at TDS. We'll be recording today's presentation, so you'll get the link in your follow-up email afterwards. Our presenters today are Sue Donnell and Pete Steer. Sue is our Director of Product Marketing here at TDS. She works to identify customer needs and challenges and develop solutions with our Transition Manager product team. Our other presenter today is Pete Steer, our global trainer here at TDS. Pete has traveled the world training expert migration practitioners in Transition Manager implementation. He's developed our training program for both internal onboarding and TDS partner enablement. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during our presentation, please type them into the question box in your Zoom chat window. I'll bring them up at the end of our presentation for us to answer. Now we'll turn it over to Sue and Pete.
Thanks, Marguerite. And thanks everyone for joining us today. The New England Patriots did not become 6-time Super Bowl champs by having the best playbooks that they just left sitting on a shelf only to be taken down on game day. And yet that is just what many organizations do with their DR plans. They're static documents that become out of date almost immediately, so they'd be highly ineffective when they're needed most during an outage. The Patriots successfully operate in a highly dynamic environment where anything can happen, much like IT environments. And even though they can't predict and address every potential risk, like injuries or bad calls or changes in the weather, they're always ready to shift their play to get to the end zone. And that's because they have a plan. The team's playbooks were created based on an understanding of the players' skills and gaps, their environment, their strengths, weaknesses, as well as what they know about the opposing team's plays and their players' strengths and weaknesses and how they perform. Playbooks are designed for coaches and players, the people who will execute the plan at game time. They have simple diagrams that are easy to understand and execute, not hundreds of pages of text and instructions. Here we can see our new quarterback, Cam Newton. He's all coffeeed up and studying the plays, so he'll be ready to run the right plays for every situation that occurs on game day. Today, we'll talk about what organizations need to do so that they can become like Cam and the Patriots and rapidly respond to any type of unexpected events and keep systems running without disruption. A key takeaway from today's webinar is that unplanned outages and disruption will happen, and knowing how to recover is the most important part of your plan, regardless of what caused the outage. Just about every organization has experienced at least one outage in the past few years, most of which have lasted at least one full workday. A recent study by Enlogic found that nearly 75% of unplanned data center downtime was caused by some type of human error. And very few organizations recover rapidly in under an hour from an outage. The longer an outage lasts, the more costly it becomes to business. And as IT environments become even more complex, outages will likely happen more often. Every business today is facing the same challenge: transform or be displaced. And everyone is talking about digital transformation, the process of adopting more digital technology to transform services and businesses, or replacing non-digital and manual processes with digital processes, and replacing older digital technology with newer digital technology. More than 500 million applications will be built in just the next few years, more than have been built in the past 40 years combined. This will significantly increase the complexity of IT environments. So as IT organizations rush to support business digital transformation by adopting new technology, by migrating apps to the cloud, and by trying to deliver new engaging experiences for customers, IT must transform itself first to support these new business requirements for digital transformation. And that's because any type of change across IT is difficult and risky. and an increasingly complex landscape will heighten the risk of outages. So to be able to create a plan, IT organizations must have insight into their environment to gain a deep understanding of how their applications work, so they'll always be prepared to recover from outages, whether they're due to a hardware failure, a user error, security breach, or even a natural disaster. So how can IT and business be prepared and execute on their transformation? Well, another key takeaway for today is that you cannot plan for everything or anticipate every risk. You should be as prepared and proactive as possible, but disaster recovery is really not about identifying risks. Disaster recovery is about recovery, regardless of the root cause. So let's talk about the key steps organizations must take to create a recovery plan which they can execute to restore service for critical apps while meeting service level agreements and compliance requirements. First, IT needs to understand the scope of recovery requirements for the business and assess its current capabilities to meet those requirements. IT and business teams need to work together and identify mission critical apps, understand how they work, what their dependencies are, and how they're hosted across hybrid environments. Next, business needs to define a scoring method to assess an application's business impact or its criticality to business, and assess the impact of downtime for each app in measurable ways, such as cost of lost revenue or impact to reputation. IT can then map the right recovery process to each application based on its score. Then it's time for teams to work together across silos to test recovery plans, validate them, identify gaps and conflicts, prioritize tasks to close those gaps, and then retest. Now, testing your DR plan may sound obvious, but even though 95% of companies have DR plans, they're tested very infrequently. And 23% of organizations never test their DR plans at all. So how do IT and business teams work together to capture all the application data they need, figure out how their applications work, identify their recovery strategies, map recovery methods to apps, and then generate tasks in the correct order to ensure that service is restored on time without bringing other systems down? Well, let's hand it over to Pete, and we can take a look at Transition Manager, our platform for IT transformation, and see how it enables teams to plan, test, and recover from any kind of outage. Oops.
Great, thanks, Sue. I will snag the screen from you, perfect. And here we are in Transition Manager. So Sue's brought up a lot of great points in her presentation just now, and what I want you to keep in mind today as I go through this demo is really the point that Transition Manager is like our playbook, right? And we, as the IT experts, can use that playbook to its ultimate benefit, which is being able to enact all of the plays that we can orchestrate within Transition Manager. And all of that starts with a good foundation of knowledge, right? So we are all experts in our systems and how they interact with other softwares that, work to recover them or to keep them up to date or to share data between them. So our expertise is key. And then Transition Manager essentially does a lot of the legwork when it comes to sharing that data across different business silos, as well as orchestrating those different silos teams to recover as quickly and efficiently as possible with as little risk as possible. So with that in mind, it all starts with the data. So the data in Transition Manager is kept in a consistent, normalized fashion that you get to customize. And that data is easily maintained and easily accessible to whoever you want to give access to. So if we jump to the Assets tab here and quickly go to the Summary table, we get just that, a summary of all of the assets in our current IT environment that we're dealing with. And you see on the left, we have different bundles in the bundle column. And a bundle is one way to group assets. So based on the bundle names here, we see the groupings could help us quickly identify where information came from. We see we have some ETL imports from various sources. where those specific assets are going to, what event are they involved in. So we see some things are grouped for a migration, some things are grouped for a cloud migration. We also have some integration happening. So we have different ways to take our data and group it for particular purposes. And as we'll see throughout this demo, that ability to group the data is very, very flexible. So again, it starts with the data. So all the data is aggregated from many sources. We go through, whenever we interface with a client or partner for the first time, we want to figure out what information we're dealing with for whichever project that they have going on. So we aggregate data from many sources, again, grabbing only the specific data that we need for its intended use. And let's say we want to do a migration and some disaster recovery planned failovers. All of those things are needing slightly different pieces of information that we could gather from anyone's database. So we fine tune what we want, and then we get to customize the view of that data within each individual asset record. And that's all well and good. And then we take that data and we can use it to strategically orchestrate certain steps within a runbook, okay? So with all of the data organized and our intended use for that data is realized, we can have a successful event, whatever that may be. Now, the issue is unforeseen outages, right? So we have all these plans in place. We have all of this anticipating work set up, but what happens when the unplanned occurs? Well, in Transition Manager, similar to the NFL's playbooks, we have the plans for an expected event, right? The defense to be in a certain spot at a certain time, this play will work to counter that. So within Transition Manager, we can inject those baseline fundamental recovery plans and then have that 80 to 90% completed plan ready to go in Transition Manager, and we'll see just how quickly we can apply that plan to a certain group of infrastructure. So how quickly can we do this, and where do these plans come from? Well, let's jump a little deeper into these different assets and let's look at a particular application. So let's say we're in the middle of our Transition Manager usage, we have all of our data, maybe we're in the middle of a migration, and we have an unplanned outage. Well, immediately that unplanned outage is likely going to be brought to our attention when someone is using an application and that application fails to function properly. So typically, the application layer is where we would find that outage. So our business rules orchestrator seems to be working incorrectly. So I can go right into that application record, and I immediately, and when I say I immediately, also anyone with access to this instance of Transition Manager immediately has access to the data that is pertinent to whatever we might want to do with that application, not to mention its underlying infrastructure. So up at the top of this record, we see a lot of different fields, okay? Many of them may look familiar to you, and specifically you'll notice there are blue highlighted fields. These blue highlighted fields, in this case, based on the customizations I've made, represent our disaster recovery fields, okay? So they will help us to identify what tooling might be in use, the RPO and RTO of this particular application, what's the business criticality of this, and what recovery tier does that coincide with. In this case, we have a recovery tier of gold. We see there's a certain type of resilience plan, which helps me as the expert looking at this data to understand what needs to happen, but also, we'll see in a second, helps Transition Manager to understand the rules that are written out in the playbook, in the plan that we have, that will automatically generate appropriate steps for this asset to go through. And those steps might be having a human go and do something to the system. It might be an automated API call, having this asset speak to, or I should say Transition Manager speak to a software, send that software data, gather data from that software in real time, and do what needs to be done in order to get this back on track. Now, this might be the impetus of our incident, right? This application is not working, but what about the blast radius, it's sometimes called? What about those assets that are directly connected to this? Are they also affected with the outage of this application? Do we know that information, right? How can we quickly assess which other assets ought to be looked at when we notice one thing is functioning improperly? Well, with Transition Manager and your database of information all in one spot, we have this nice little link right here. So we have the bundle, that's the grouping that we decided to put this asset into. And we also have this number 10 here, which, excuse me, is the number of what we call a dependency group. And that dependency group is just that. It's a group of assets that are dependent upon one another. So within this particular record down below, we can see all of the infrastructure it is directly attached to, right? One layer of relationship. However, these assets down here might have yet another layer of connection. So we want to see the full picture. We want to see that full blast radius. So all I do is click on this dependency group, and this dependency group was generated by Transition Manager based on the data we have. So here we go in our picture, which I'll make full screen. We see our application, Business Rules Orchestration, and we notice that it's connected directly to obviously one layer of other assets. It has a shared server with this other application, and then this application goes out in branches again, right? So the blast radius of this is, in this case, pretty significant. We also notice a coloring difference, okay? So I'm gonna go up here and I'm gonna get rid of this highlighting real quick. And let's see what that coloring means. I have a legend tab up here, which really allows me to understand what I'm looking at from a user's perspective. So I've got blue is production and orange is development. So I have those two environments, and instead of spending a lot of time tracking down this data, presenting this new, or not new, this relevant data to other teams in the company, within 10 minutes, log into Transition Manager, go check out the blast radius of Business Rules Orchestrator. We have an outage. Let's discuss. We can go right to the discussion of what is in play here, okay? And maybe the only thing that's in play if Business Rules Orchestrator goes down is only those things immediately connected to Business Rules Orchestrator. Then we can run a specific incident management recovery runbook just for the blue assets we see here. Okay, so let's go do that real quick. Let's say we've spoken with our team, real quick conversation. Yep, all of the orange assets in here, we can investigate them. I can click into each and every one of them as needed. We can get a very clear, quick view of all the assets involved. Those orange assets are non-production. We're not worried about them. We just need to get the production assets back online as quickly as possible. So I'm going to go to my tasks tab now and go to my cookbook. And the cookbook is basically the playbook, okay, to bring back the metaphor. And here we have the full plans for DR. So this recipe, and we call it a recipe, it's in the cookbook, it's just kind of a playful metaphor. This recipe has all of the rules for certain data that we have in those asset records, and the necessary steps that a specific asset needs to go through in order to complete recovery. So regardless of the different assets that I include in this DR full plans recipe will take care of any assets based on the way that they're modeled in Transition Manager. So down here I have an event called Recover BRO, our Business Rule Orchestrator. And I also have a tag, which is similar to a bundle. It's a way to group assets. So in this case, I'm going to generate, and I'm going to recover only the Business Rules Orchestrator and its immediate connections. All right, so that's all it takes. I go to my task graph, and here, if we go to our recovery for BRO, we see we have all of the tasks necessary to recover that one application. Okay, these tasks are, again, potentially asking, or I should say requesting in a way, that a human do something, or it could be a direct integration to an outside software. If we're talking virtual machines and having a recovery and a sync and all that, all those pertinent steps, those could be API actions, which a human has to click the invoke button, or that automatically occur as soon as they become ready. So the sequence of these tasks is also vital. So this would recover just Business Rules Orchestrator and its underlying infrastructure. Now let's say something slightly different occurred. So we'll go back to our application just to run through it again. And Business Rules Orchestrator, again, has an outage, okay? So I go into my record and I click into my group and I see all of the potentially affected blast radius here. And we notice, I freeze this real quick, right here, okay, let's get rid of that highlighting. Right here, we have a shared server between Business Rules Orchestrator and this other application that is non-production, which in the previous scenario, we said, yeah, don't worry about it. But let's say we want to worry about it. So here's my blast radius. Here are all the assets that are potentially affected. And all of these different assets, if I go into this application, for example, has a similar set of data. Okay, what's the RPO, RTO? What's the recovery tier, data protection tool? Okay, some of them are blank, but again, we want to keep this data refreshed. It's easy to refresh, it's easy to maintain, and it keeps everybody in the organization speaking the same language, because we can come in here and it's very clear what's what. So with that in mind, I want to take all of these and create an incident management or disaster recovery plan for them to make sure all of these systems get inspected, get looked at, and get treated appropriately. So in that case, I take my entire group here, and I'm simply going to select all of the information. Okay, this is just a different view of that map, a table view, and I'm going to assign them, and I'm going to put them, I'm actually going to tag them here, so they're tagged as recovery. So I click assign. I want the full group this time. And I'm going to go to the cookbook once again. I'm going to use that same recipe, the instructions that will take care of any. And here I'm going to add, I want to recover the full group. Okay. And again, all of these titles here, the event being called recovery, the recovery BRO, recovery full group, those are all customizable. Whatever the jargon is in your business can be adopted. Or if new jargon needs to be created, it ought to be adopted by all. Again, consistency here, having good data is key and very easy to create, set up, customize, and maintain in Transition Manager. All right, so that was dealing with more assets, so it took slightly longer to generate. However, if we go to the task graph now, we'll notice for the same event, the recovery of Business Rules Orchestrator, we now have those other applications involved in the recovery process here. And you'll notice if we zoom in here, we have some overlap between these server level tasks and the initial application level tasks. Okay, so there are shared servers, all of that connection and that sequence of tasks is all taken into consideration based on the rules that we write in that recipe, and we get an appropriate runbook that will get us from an outage to back up and running. At the back end here, we see we've got another set of 3 tasks, which represent the individual application testing tasks as things are brought back up online. So some other things that we're looking at here are the different tools that we might be using. So we could be using Cloud Endure to migrate certain types of VMs. We could be using Zerto to migrate other types of infrastructure. Okay, you could have database infrastructure in there. I believe SRDF is in here as well. So again, all of these individual asset records have unique information in them. pertinent to the specific things that ought to be done to them during a recovery, during a migration, during whatever the case may be. So the ability to have these plans in place and know that they will be, 80 to 90% reliable without knowing what we're actually planning for, because an unplanned outage is unplanned, right? So there's only so much you can anticipate. All that you can anticipate can be put into the metadata in Transition Manager. And just as we saw here, I can quickly group and regroup things. I can also quickly tweak the recipe that generates this sequence of tasks, which I won't show you today. But with a little bit of training, you can tweak those recipes and get the appropriate tasks that you need in order to get the results you want, which is an unplanned outage occurs. We identify the problem quickly. We know that our data is trustworthy and reliable, and we can all see it and speak to it the same way, which allows us to quickly get to the mitigation steps and turn that outage, that unplanned outage, into a non-issue very quickly, accurately, and nearly risk-free. And again, the sequence of tasks here are either telling a human what to do, making an API call, or any combination of them. And as we see, based on the different assets, we could be using different softwares in order to get from point A to point B. And with that, I'll hand it back to Sue for the wrap-up.
Thanks, Pete. That was great. So as we've seen in today's presentation, as IT organizations grapple with change, it's important to have a game plan, one that keeps pace and enables you to recover quickly, no matter what the cause. And as IT environments continue to become increasingly complex, business demands for new technology will certainly keep pace. And in the uncertain environment of IT, we can still be certain that outages will occur.
Thanks so much, Sue and Pete. I think we'll go ahead and take some time for questions now. Just a reminder, be sure to type your questions into the chat box in your control panel. It looks like we have one here, and it's related to, I think, what you had showed earlier, Pete. We use tools like Veeam and HCX to recover VMs in the cloud and our DR facilities. Can you integrate with those tools?
Yes, that's a great question. So as in the demonstration, I obviously showed a few tools there. Any tool that has an API interface allows us to potentially integrate with it. Based on what the tool does, Transition Manager can easily pass data to or accept data from many, many tools. And again, the ones I showed are ones that we've seen and used before. Veeam HCX are other tools that I have definitely heard of. I believe we have a pretty robust integration with HCX nearly ready to go. So those are definitely familiar, big tools that we are aware of and definitely ready to integrate with.
Awesome. And I guess that wraps it up for us now. To learn more about how to create an effective on-demand DR plan using Transition Manager, visit www.tdsi.com and be sure to follow us on LinkedIn under Transitional Data Services-TDS. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.